Hey there, sleep enthusiasts. Ready to unlock some secrets of a good night's sleep? We're diving deep into the science of sleep today, a topic that, let's be honest, can be a real struggle.
Oh, definitely. It's something we all deal with.
Exactly. And there's so much info out there about sleep, but how much is actually true?
Right. Separating fact from fiction, that's what we're here for.
Exactly. So to help us out, we've got excerpts from 3 books, all by leading sleep experts. We've got The Mystery of Sleep, that's by Dr. Mir Krieger, Science of Sleep by Dr. Heather Darwell-Smith, and then Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker.
3 very different perspectives on sleep.
Yeah. And our mission today, practical takeaways, right? Things that you can actually use to help you sleep better.
Exactly. We're not just going to talk about the why of sleep. We want to actually give you some tools to improve your sleep quality.
And of course, debunk some of those stubborn sleep myths.
Oh, absolutely. There are so many of those floating around.
Definitely. Okay, so one thing that really stood out to me, especially from Why We Sleep, was that sleep isn't just this one thing. Dr. Walker talks about all these different stages of sleep, each with its own purpose.
It makes sense when you think about it, right? Your brain isn't just hitting the off switch when you fall asleep.
Yeah. So what's actually happening?
Well, you go through these cycles, right? Light sleep, deep sleep, and then that dream-filled REM sleep. And each one plays a vital role in restoring and recharging your body and your brain.
So it's like your brain's going through a whole routine, like a carefully choreographed dance every night.
Exactly, like a nightly reboot with multiple programs running.
Love that analogy. Okay, so speaking of different sleep needs, I'm going to bring up the whole night owl versus early bird thing. This really resonated with me. I've always been way more of a night person.
Me too, actually.
And in Why We Sleep, Dr. Walker talks about how our chronotype, whether we're a night owl or an early bird, it's actually largely determined by our genes. It's not just a choice.
It's like we're wired a certain way. And this has a big impact on how we function in a world that's often geared toward early birds.
Right. Think about those early school start times.
Yeah.
Ugh. Dr. Walker really highlighted how tough that is for night owls.
Oh, for sure. It's a recipe for chronic sleep deprivation, which, let's be honest, can mess with you in a lot of ways.
Definitely. And The Mystery of Sleep even points out how teenagers especially have this delayed sleep phase, so trying to get them to bed early is almost a losing battle.
Their bodies just aren't ready to sleep yet. It's not about being rebellious, it's biology.
That's so important for parents to understand. Okay, let's shift gears for a sec and talk about something I think we've all experienced. The caffeine crash.
Oh, yeah. The dreaded afternoon slump.
So, tell me, what's actually happening in our brains when we get that crash? We're all familiar with the feeling, but why does it happen?
Well, Why We Sleep explains that caffeine blocks a chemical in our brains called adenosine. And this adenosine, it's basically our brain's sleepiness signal.
So the caffeine's like, nope, not sleepy.
Exactly. But here's the catch. While the caffeine is busy blocking that signal, adenosine keeps building up in the background.
It's like hitting the snooze button on your brain's sleep alarm. But it's still going off, you're just ignoring it.
A perfect analogy. So when that caffeine starts to wear off, all that pent-up adenosine floods your system.
The bam, caffeine crash.
Exactly. And The Mystery of Sleep points out that it takes a surprisingly long time for caffeine to completely leave your system.
Oh, really? How long are we talking?
We're talking 9 to 12 hours, and even longer if you're on birth control pills, which is something a lot of people don't realize.
So that afternoon latte might be messing with your sleep way more than you think.
It's definitely something to consider, especially if you're sensitive to caffeine.
Okay, so let's switch gears again and talk about one of the most, mind-blowing reasons to prioritize sleep. Its impact on memory. It's not just about feeling rested. It's about literally rewiring your brain.
This is where sleep really shines. During sleep, your brain is busy transferring memories. It moves them from short-term storage to long-term storage.
Okay, break that down for me. What parts of the brain are involved?
All right, so there's the hippocampus. Think of it like your brain's inbox. That's where new information hangs out temporarily.
Okay, got it.
And then there's the cortex, which is more like your brain's filing cabinet. That's where memories are stored long-term.
So sleep is basically hitting save on all that important info you took in during the day.
Exactly. And those slow waves we see in deep sleep, those are like tiny delivery trucks carrying those memory packets to their permanent storage location.
Such a cool image. And I learned from Why We Sleep that sleep isn't just passively storing everything. It's actually choosing what to remember. It strengthens the important connections and weakens the ones that aren't as crucial.
It's like your brain's cleaning house while you sleep, getting rid of the clutter and making room for the important stuff.
That's amazing. So sleep is like a memory masterclass. Now I'm thinking I should try reviewing my notes right before bed.
That's actually a great strategy. Take advantage of that sleep-memory connection.
Okay, so let's talk about something that, affects everyone. Emotions. How are sleep and our emotions connected?
Why we sleep makes a really strong case for that connection. When we don't get enough sleep, we become more reactive to everything. It's like our emotional volume gets turned up.
So it's not just about being grumpy when we're tired. It's like we experience everything more intensely.
Exactly. And there's a reason for that. Sleep deprivation weakens the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of our brain that's in charge of rational thinking, keeping things in check. At the same time, the emotional centers of our brain become more sensitive.
So we're basically running on less logic and more raw emotion.
Right. That's why we might overreact to things or make impulsive decisions when we're sleep deprived.
And why we sleep even links chronic sleep deprivation to serious mental health conditions like PTSD, anxiety, and depression. It's not just about feeling tired. It can have a real impact on our mental health.
Absolutely. It's a vicious cycle. Sleep problems can make mental health issues worse and vice versa.
And the mystery of sleep brought up something else really important: misdiagnosis. They were saying that some people who have sleep apnea are actually treated for depression when the real problem is that they're not getting enough sleep.
It's so important to get a proper diagnosis if you're struggling with sleep or any mental health concerns. Make sure you're treating the root cause, not just the symptoms.
Okay, so we've all heard people say, I only need 5 hours of sleep. Like, they brag about it. But is that actually possible? Can people thrive on so little sleep?
Why We Sleep tackles this myth head on. Dr. Walker talks about a famous sleep deprivation study done by a Dr. Dinges. And this study really showed that sleep deprivation has a cumulative effect. It's like debt. You keep racking it up even if you don't feel it right away.
So even if we think we're doing okay on less sleep, we're still building up this sleep debt.
Precisely. And the study showed that even after 3 nights of good sleep, those participants still hadn't returned to their baseline performance. So that whole idea that we can just catch up on sleep on the weekends, not really true.
Ugh, it's too bad. Well, at least now we know. It's so interesting how even a little sleep loss can impact us in such big ways.
Absolutely. And to address that other argument that some people use about pre-industrial tribes sleeping less, Dr. Walker points out that those tribes lived very differently from us. Plus, they still had health problems linked to their shorter sleep. So not something we should be aspiring to,
Definitely not. Okay, let's talk about another sub-saboteur.
Yeah.
Alcohol. I think a lot of people believe that a drink before bed actually helps them sleep.
It's a common misconception, but Why We Sleep really sets the record straight on this. Alcohol might make you feel drowsy initially, but it actually messes with your sleep. You don't reach those deep restorative stages.
So it's like it tricks you into thinking you're sleeping well, but it's actually sabotaging your rest.
Exactly. And remember how we talked about alcohol sedating the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain responsible for impulse control? Well, that sedation eventually spreads, disrupting those crucial sleep cycles later in the night.
So we might feel relaxed and sleepy after a drink, but our sleep ends up suffering.
Right. And while some people turn to things like cannabis or melatonin for sleep, the mystery of sleep points out that the research on these is still limited.
Always good to consult with your doctor before self-treating with anything, right?
Absolutely. Understanding how things like caffeine, alcohol, and even certain medications affect your sleep is crucial for making informed choices.
Well, on that note, let's wrap up part 1 of our deep dive. We've already learned so much about the different stages of sleep, the whole night owl versus early bird thing, and how everyday substances can really mess with our sleep.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore some practical tips for creating a better sleep environment and dive into the world of sleep disorders. It's going to get really interesting.
Welcome back, sleep enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Last time, we were talking about some major sleep disruptors like caffeine and alcohol.
Definitely a lot to think about there.
Yeah. But now, let's shift gears a little and talk about what we can actually do to, sleep better.
Right. The good stuff.
Exactly. And we left off with kind of a cliffhanger about the risks of sleeping pills.
Yeah, that's a heavy topic for sure.
So I'm curious, what are the alternatives? If you're struggling with sleep, what can you do that doesn't involve medication?
Well, there's one approach that Dr. Walker really advocates for in Why We Sleep, and it's completely drug-free. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI for short.
CBT for insomnia. Interesting. I've heard of CBT for like anxiety and depression, but this is the new one for me.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize it can be used for insomnia too. But it's becoming more and more popular. It's really effective at addressing those underlying thoughts and behaviors that can keep us up at night.
So it's more about like getting to the root of the problem, not just masking it with medication.
Exactly. It's about changing those unhelpful sleep habits that we all develop sometimes. And Dr. Walker explains that it's been shown to help people fall asleep faster, sleep longer, and just have better quality sleep overall.
Wow, that sounds really promising. Are there any specific techniques involved in CBTI that, like, our listeners could try at home?
Yeah, definitely. One key component is called sleep restriction, which sounds a little counterintuitive, I know.
Sleep restriction, that sounds kind of intense.
I know, right? But basically, instead of tossing and turning for hours in bed, you actually limit the amount of time you allow yourself to be in bed. It sounds crazy, but it helps consolidate your sleep and make it more efficient.
So it's about training your body to associate bed with sleep, not with, like, frustration and restlessness.
Exactly. And Dr. Krieger in The Mystery of Sleep adds that keeping a sleep diary can be really helpful too.
Oh, a sleep diary, like a food journal, but for sleep.
Exactly. By tracking your sleep patterns, you can start to identify those little things that might be sabotaging your sleep without you even realizing it.
Like scrolling through your phone in bed or having that late night snack.
Exactly. It's about raising your self-awareness. And speaking of relaxation, Dr. Krieger also talks about a bunch of techniques that can help calm the mind and body before sleep. Things like progressive muscle relaxation, paced breathing, even visualization techniques, and hypnosis.
Makes sense. It's all about shifting your focus away from those racing thoughts, right?
Exactly, creating a sense of calm. And Dr. Walker is a big proponent of mindfulness meditation for sleep too.
Mindfulness meditation, so like paying attention to your breath and your body.
Exactly. By focusing on the present moment, you can quiet those mental chatterboxes and drift off to sleep more peacefully.
Love it. Okay, so we can't talk about sleep without talking about sleep apnea. It's one of the most common sleep disorders, and it can be really disruptive. And in The Mystery of Sleep, Dr. Krieger emphasizes that it's not just a problem for overweight men, as many people think.
Right. It's way more common than people realize, and it can affect anyone. Age, gender, body type, it doesn't matter.
So it's often misdiagnosed then, especially in women and children.
Unfortunately, yes. Which means people can go years without treatment, and that can lead to some serious health problems down the line.
So what are the warning signs? How do you know if you might have sleep apnea?
Well, the classic symptoms are loud snoring, pauses in breathing during sleep, excessive daytime sleepiness, and waking up feeling like you haven't slept at all.
And The Mystery of Sleep mentions that untreated sleep apnea can increase the risk of all sorts of serious conditions, like heart disease, stroke, even some cancers.
Yeah, it's definitely not something to ignore. Early diagnosis and treatment are key.
So how is sleep apnea diagnosed?
The gold standard is a sleep study. It's called a polysomnogram. Basically, you spend the night in a sleep lab hooked up to all these monitors that track your brain waves, your breathing, your heart rate, your blood oxygen levels.
Sounds a little intense.
It can be, yeah. But it gives doctors the information they need to accurately diagnose and treat sleep apnea.
And what about treatment? What are the options?
Well, the most common treatment is CPAP therapy. It stands for continuous positive airway pressure. Basically, you wear a mask that delivers a constant flow of air to keep your airway open.
I've heard of that. Is it effective?
It is. It can take some getting used to, wearing that mask every night, but it really works. And The Mystery of Sleep also mentions some other options, like oral appliances that help adjust the position of your jaw and tongue. And in some cases, especially for children, they might recommend surgery to remove enlarged tonsils or adenoids.
So there are a few different approaches, depending on the cause and severity of the apnea. Okay, let's move on to another sleep disorder that I think deserves more attention. Narcolepsy. I think most people associate it with, like, suddenly falling asleep at random times, but it's actually much more complex than that.
You're right. The Mystery of Sleep describes it as a neurological disorder that disrupts the brain's ability to regulate sleep-wake cycles.
And it's not just about feeling sleepy, right? There are other symptoms, too.
Yeah, for sure. Some people with narcolepsy experience cataplexy. It's a sudden loss of muscle control, often triggered by strong emotions.
Wow, that sounds scary.
It can be. And some people also have hallucinations, sleep paralysis, all sorts of things. It can be really tough to live with.
So are there any treatments that can help people with narcolepsy?
Yeah, definitely. Medications are often prescribed, like modafinil, which promotes wakefulness. And for people who have cataplexy, there are medications to help manage those episodes. And then there are lifestyle modifications that can help too, like taking scheduled naps throughout the day.
So while there's no cure for narcolepsy, there are ways to manage it and improve quality of life.
Absolutely. And as with any sleep disorder, early diagnosis and treatment are really important.
Okay, so let's talk about sleep across the lifespan.
Yeah.
Because, our sleep needs change a lot from infancy to old age.
For sure. Our sleep patterns evolve as we do.
So let's start at the beginning. What do new parents need to know about baby sleep? I feel like that's a question that keeps a lot of parents up at night, literally.
Right. The mystery of sleep really emphasizes that babies have their own unique sleep patterns. And it's important for parents to understand and support those patterns, not trying to force adult sleep patterns onto their babies.
That makes sense. Newborns aren't exactly known for sleeping through the night.
Exactly. It takes time for those sleep cycles to mature. Dr. Krager explains that babies gradually start to have longer nighttime sleep episodes somewhere between 2 and 12 months.
So there's hope.
Yeah, definitely. And by about 4 to 6 months, they should be able to fall back asleep on their own without needing their parents to intervene.
That's a big milestone. So patience is key. And I guess it's never too early to start establishing those healthy sleep habits.
Exactly. Dr. Krager emphasizes putting babies to bed on their backs when they're drowsy but still awake, and creating a consistent bedtime routine. And as tempting as it is, try to avoid checking on them every time they make a sound.
So it's about setting those good sleep foundations from the get-go.
Yeah.
And then as babies become toddlers, it's all about sticking to a regular sleep schedule, limiting screen time, and seeking professional help if you're noticing any persistent sleep problems.
Exactly. Consistency and early intervention are key.
Okay, what about sleep during pregnancy? I imagine that comes with its own unique set of challenges.
It definitely does. Sleep problems are super common during pregnancy. The mystery of sleep points out frequent urination, hormonal shifts, and just plain discomfort can all lead to disrupted sleep.
Right, as your body changes, it gets harder to find a comfortable position.
Exactly. And Dr. Krager recommends sleeping on your side to improve blood flow to the baby. It also takes some pressure off the aorta.
Makes sense. And those hormonal fluctuations during pregnancy, I imagine they can affect sleep too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And some pre-existing sleep disorders like restless leg syndrome can actually worsen during pregnancy. So it's really important to talk to your doctor about any sleep concerns you're having.
Open communication with your healthcare provider is so crucial, especially during pregnancy.
Definitely. Okay, let's fast forward a bit to another life transition that can really disrupt sleep. Menopause.
Yeah, those hormonal shifts can really mess with sleep, right? I've heard those hot flashes and night sweats can be brutal.
They can be. Dr. Krager suggests keeping the bedroom cool, using breathable bedding, and practicing relaxation techniques to try to minimize their impact on sleep.
So it's all about creating a sleep-friendly environment and finding ways to manage those hormonal fluctuations. Are there any other remedies for menopausal sleep disruptions?
Some studies suggest that soy products and certain herbal remedies might help with hot flashes. But as with any supplement, it's best to talk to your doctor before trying anything new.
Okay, good advice. So let's talk about something that I think affects everyone at some point. Stress. We've all felt that wired and tired feeling when we're stressed out. Like your mind is racing, but your body's exhausted.
Oh yeah, definitely. Why we sleep makes it very clear that stress is a major sleep saboteur. It's like our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, kicks into overdrive when we're stressed, and it pumps out all this adrenaline and cortisol, which are hormones that keep us alert and on edge.
So even when we're exhausted, our bodies are like, nope, gotta stay awake and deal with this threat.
Right, and if that stress becomes chronic, it just gets worse and worse. You end up in this vicious cycle of poor sleep and even more stress.
Like a runaway train.
Yeah.
And the mystery of sleep adds that some medical conditions that are linked to stress, like hyperthyroidism, can also disrupt sleep.
Right. Hyperthyroidism speeds up your metabolism, making it harder to relax and fall asleep. So again, sometimes what looks like a sleep problem is actually a sign of something else going on.
So managing stress is crucial for good sleep. What are some specific techniques that can help break that stress-sleep cycle?
Well, Dr. Walker is a big proponent of establishing a relaxing bedtime routine. It's about signaling to your body and mind that it's time to wind down.
So no more working or scrolling through social media right before bed?
Right. Those things keep your brain engaged and make it harder to transition into sleep mode. Instead, try taking a warm bath, reading a book, listening to calming music, practicing relaxation techniques like deep breathing or meditation.
Sounds much more relaxing. And in The Mystery of Sleep, Dr. Krieger suggests avoiding stimulating activities in the hours before bed, too, like arguments or intense exercise.
It's all about creating a sense of calm and tranquility as you're getting ready for sleep. And if stress is a constant issue in your life, finding healthy ways to manage that stress is key.
Like yoga, spending time in nature, talking to a therapist.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of social connection. Talking to a friend or loved one can sometimes help ease that burden.
It's about finding those healthy coping mechanisms that work for you. Okay, so we talked about stress in general, but I think it's important to highlight its impact on certain groups, especially those who are dealing with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. Sleep plays such a crucial role in healing and recovery from trauma. And why we sleep really digs into this connection between sleep and PTSD.
So what does Dr. Walker have to say about it?
Well, he explains that people with PTSD often experience nightmares, insomnia, fragmented sleep. It makes it so much harder to process the trauma and can actually exacerbate their symptoms.
It's like a terrible catch-22.
Yeah.
The thing they need to heal is the thing that's being disrupted.
Exactly. And Dr. Walker's research suggests that people with PTSD have high levels of the stress hormone noradrenaline in their brains, and that might be interfering with their ability to reach REM sleep, which is essential for processing emotions and consolidating memories.
So it's like their brains are stuck in this heightened state of alertness, making it hard to process those traumatic memories.
Exactly. And that can really perpetuate the cycle of anxiety and fear.
That's heartbreaking. But are there any treatments that can help people with PTSD improve their sleep?
Yeah. There are therapies like trauma-focused CBT and EMDR. These therapies help people process and reframe those traumatic memories. And they've also been shown to improve sleep quality in people with PTSD.
So addressing the trauma can have a ripple effect on sleep.
Right. It's all interconnected.
Okay, let's talk about another mental health condition that often goes hand in hand with sleep problems. Depression. I know we touched on this earlier when we were talking about misdiagnosis.
Yeah, The Mystery of Sleep really emphasizes this bidirectional relationship between depression and sleep. Sleep problems can worsen depression, and depression can make it harder to sleep. It's a vicious cycle.
And it's concerning to learn that people with depression often experience a whole range of sleep issues. Insomnia, trouble staying asleep, waking up super early in the morning.
It's another reminder of how important it is to get a proper evaluation from a qualified healthcare professional if you're struggling. You need to rule out any underlying medical conditions and make sure you're getting the right treatment.
Okay, so let's shift to seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. I know a lot of people struggle with this, especially during the winter months, the winter blues.
Yeah, SAD is all about those disruptions in our circadian rhythms, our internal clocks. Why We Sleep explains that the decreased sunlight exposure during winter can throw off our melatonin production, which can lead to fatigue and low mood.
So it's like our bodies get stuck in perpetual night mode.
That's a great way to put it. And Why We Sleep highlights light therapy as a really effective treatment for SAD. Basically, you're exposed to bright light that mimics sunlight, which helps to reset your internal clock.
Like giving your body a little dose of sunshine, even on the darkest days.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to another mental health condition that can really impact sleep: schizophrenia. It affects thinking, perception, behavior, and sleep disturbances are a common symptom.
Yeah, it's a complex disorder.
It is. And Why We Sleep talks about how people with schizophrenia often have really abnormal sleep architecture. Like they have reduced slow wave sleep and increased REM sleep latency. And they might also have fragmented sleep, nightmares, trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep. Their sleep patterns can be all over the place.
So their sleep is often erratic and unpredictable. And do we know why that is?
The exact reasons are still being studied, but Dr. Walker suggests there might be a genetic link. Certain genes that are involved in both sleep regulation and the development of schizophrenia might be playing a role.
So there could be a genetic predisposition to both schizophrenia and these sleep abnormalities.
It's definitely an area of ongoing research. The more we understand the connection, the better equipped we'll be to help.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of specific conditions, but Why We Sleep really emphasizes the importance of sleep for mental well-being in general.
Oh yeah, Dr. Walker makes it very clear that sleep is just as essential for our mental health as it is for our physical health.
Right, it's not just about preventing disease. It's about feeling good, thinking clearly, managing stress effectively.
Exactly. And when we're chronically sleep deprived, we're basically impairing our brains. We can't function at our best. And over time, that can increase our risk of developing mental health disorders. Sleep isn't a luxury, it's a necessity.
So true. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about medications for a minute. Are there certain medications that are known to disrupt sleep? I know some medications can make you drowsy, but can they also have the opposite effect?
Oh yeah, definitely. The Mystery of Sleep has a whole chapter dedicated to the effects of various medications on sleep. And Dr. Krieger points out that some commonly prescribed drugs, like beta blockers for high blood pressure, can cause nightmares and insomnia.
Wow, that's really good to know.
Yeah, definitely something to be aware of. He really emphasizes talking to your doctor about potential side effects. If sleep is a concern, ask about alternative medications. And he also warns about the risk of addiction and dependence with certain medications like narcotic painkillers and sleeping pills.
So always weigh the benefits and risks. Have an open conversation with your doctor about any sleep concerns.
Exactly. And be cautious about over-the-counter sleep aids, too, especially those that contain antihistamines.
Those are in a lot of allergy and cold medications.
Right. And while they might make you drowsy initially, they don't provide natural, restful sleep. And they can often leave you feeling groggy the next day.
Not a great long-term solution.
Definitely not.
Okay, what about jet lag? I'm a terrible jet lag sufferer. It takes me days to adjust to a new time zone.
I hear you. It can be rough. But the Mystery of Sleep has some good advice. Dr. Krieger suggests gradually adjusting your sleep schedule in the days leading up to your trip, if you can.
Oh, so if you're traveling east, you start going to bed and waking up a little earlier each day.
Exactly. And the opposite if you're traveling west. It's about easing your body into the new time zone. And once you arrive, expose yourself to sunlight during the day and avoid bright light at night.
That makes sense. Those natural light cues are so powerful.
Absolutely. And stay hydrated, avoid caffeine and alcohol, and try to resist those long naps during the day. They're tempting, but they can actually make it harder to adjust.
Okay, good to know. Now, what about shift work? I imagine working nights or rotating shifts can really throw off your sleep.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. Shift work can wreak havoc on our natural sleep-wake cycles. The Mystery of Sleep talks about how people who regularly work night shifts are at increased risk of developing all sorts of problems, from sleep disorders to cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, even certain types of cancer.
It's like our bodies just aren't meant to be awake all night and asleep all day.
Right. Our internal clocks get completely thrown off. And while it's not always possible to avoid shift work, there are things you can do to try to minimize the impact.
Like sticking to a regular sleep schedule even on your days off, and making sure your bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool when you're trying to sleep.
Exactly. And those usual suspects, limiting caffeine and alcohol.
Makes sense. Now, for people who are struggling with persistent sleep problems, where do they even begin?
Well, that's where sleep clinics and sleep specialists come in. The Mystery of Sleep talks about how sleep medicine is a relatively new field, but it's grown so much in recent decades as we've learned more about sleep disorders.
It's important to know that not all doctors are experts in sleep.
Right. If you're having trouble sleeping, seek out a board-certified sleep specialist. They have the expertise to diagnose and treat those specific conditions.
So what kinds of services do sleep clinics offer?
They offer a whole range of diagnostic tests, including that polysomnogram we talked about earlier. They also have something called a multiple sleep latency test and a maintenance of wakefulness test. And then they offer all sorts of treatment options. CPAP therapy for sleep apnea, medication management for narcolepsy, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia.
Wow, so it's like a one-stop shop for all things sleep.
Pretty much.
Okay, let's move on to some practical tips for improving sleep hygiene. Those everyday habits that can really make a difference.
Absolutely. This is where we can all take control, regardless of our circumstances.
Okay, I'm ready to take notes.
Well, both Why We Sleep and The Mystery of Sleep really emphasize the importance of creating a consistent sleep schedule. Go to bed and wake up around the same time every day, even on weekends. I know, sleeping in on Saturdays is tempting.
So tempting.
But sticking to a regular sleep schedule, even on your days off, helps regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle.
Consistency is key.
What else? Pay attention to your sleep environment. Make sure your bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool.
So blackout curtains, earplugs, a fan for white noise.
All good ideas.
Yeah.
And of course, avoid big meals, caffeine, and alcohol close to bedtime. Give your body time to digest and unwind before you hit the hay.
So no more late-night snacking or nightcaps. Got it. What about exercise?
Regular exercise is great for sleep, but avoid those intense workouts too close to bedtime.
Okay, no more late-night gym sessions. Makes sense. What about those racing thoughts that pop up the second your head hits the pillow?
Ugh, we've all been there, right?
Right.
Dr. Krieger recommends creating a worry journal. Write down any thoughts or concerns that are keeping you up.
Get it out of your head, not a paper.
Exactly. It can help you let go of those worries and clear your mind for sleep. Dr. Walker is also a big fan of relaxation techniques like deep breathing or progressive muscle relaxation to calm the body and mind before sleep.
Okay, let's talk sleep positions. Is there an ideal position for sleep? Side sleeping, back sleeping, stomach sleeping.
The mystery of sleep suggests that sleeping on your side might be the most beneficial, especially if you have sleep apnea or back pain. It keeps the airway open and reduces pressure on the spine.
So stomach sleepers and back sleepers might want to experiment with side sleeping.
It's worth a try. And speaking of positions, let's not forget about pillows.
Pillows are so important.
Right. A good pillow can make a huge difference. Dr. Krieger recommends choosing a pillow that keeps your head and neck aligned with your spine. Side sleepers might need a thicker pillow, while back sleepers might do better with a thinner one.
It's about finding what works best for your body.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up this part, I have to ask our dreams. They're so mysterious. What's actually happening in our brains when we dream?
Why We Sleep has a whole section on the science of dreaming. And Dr. Walker actually challenges that classic Freudian interpretation of dreams as repressed desires.
So they're not all about hidden meanings and symbolism.
Well, that might be part of it, but Dr. Walker suggests that dreams might have a more practical function. He proposes that REM sleep, that's the stage where we have those vivid dreams, plays a crucial role in processing emotions, consolidating memories, and even tapping into our creative potential.
So our dreams might actually be helping us learn and grow.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Okay, what about nightmares? Those can be so unsettling.
Nightmares are those vivid, disturbing dreams that often wake us up feeling scared or anxious.
I think we've all had them at some point.
Right? And they're common in people with PTSD, as we discussed. But they can happen to anyone. And in The Mystery of Sleep, Dr. Krieger suggests they can be triggered by stress, anxiety, certain medications, even sleep deprivation.
So those nightmares might be a sign that something else is going on.
Exactly. If they're a recurring problem, Dr. Krieger recommends keeping a dream journal to track any patterns, practicing relaxation techniques before bed, and seeking professional help if you need it.
Okay, last question before we move on to the final part of our deep dive. How much sleep do we actually need?
The million-dollar question. And both Why We Sleep and The Mystery of Sleep agree. It depends.
Of course, there's no magic number that applies to everyone.
Right. Our genetics, our age, our lifestyle, our health, it all plays a role. Dr. Walker debunks that whole everyone needs 8 hours myth. Some people might thrive on 7 hours, while others might need 9 or even 10.
So it's about finding what works best for you.
Exactly. Pay attention to your body. Dr. Walker says to figure out how much sleep you need to feel refreshed and alert during the day.
Listen to your internal sleep compass.
Exactly. And Dr. Krieger adds that if you're consistently feeling tired during the day, even after what you think is enough sleep, talk to a sleep specialist. You might have an underlying sleep disorder that needs to be addressed.
So it's not just about the quantity of sleep, it's about the quality too.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. Sleep disorders, stress, medications, life transitions, so much good stuff. But stick with us for the final part of our deep dive. We'll be exploring sleep research, the future of sleep medicine, and how we can all work together to create a world that prioritizes sleep. Welcome back to the final part of our sleep deep dive.
I can't believe we're already here.
It's flown by, hasn't it? We've covered so much about, how important sleep is to our health and well-being.
Definitely. And how much it really affects us in every aspect of our lives.
Absolutely. But I kind of want to zoom out now. We've talked about what individuals can do to improve their sleep.
Right.
But it feels like there are these bigger forces at play, too. Like society as a whole isn't really set up to support good sleep.
That's so true. And Why We Sleep actually addresses this head on.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. Dr. Walker calls it a silent sleep loss epidemic.
Wow, an epidemic. That sounds kind of scary.
It is kind of scary when you look at the data. I mean, we're all sleeping way less than previous generations.
Yeah, heard that.
And it's not just because we're all super busy either. Our 24/7 culture, artificial light, technology, it's all contributing to this sleep deprivation crisis.
It's like we're living in a world that's actively working against our natural sleep rhythms.
Exactly. And Dr. Walker argues that this isn't just a personal problem, it's a public health crisis.
A public health crisis. Wow.
Yeah, he links sleep deprivation to so many things, like increased accidents, reduced productivity, a higher risk of chronic diseases.
What kind of diseases are we talking about?
You name it, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, even certain types of cancer. It's not just about feeling tired, it's about seriously compromising our health.
Wow, that's a lot to consider. And it sounds like this sleep loss epidemic is actually costing us a lot of money, too.
Exactly. Sleep deprivation leads to billions of dollars in lost productivity and healthcare expenses every year.
That's crazy. So given how big this problem is there any hope? Can we actually reclaim our sleep in this fast-paced world?
Dr. Walker is optimistic. I'll give him that. He thinks that if we increase awareness about sleep and implement some evidence-based solutions, we can turn things around.
Okay, so what are some of the solutions he proposes?
One big one is later school start times for teenagers.
Yeah, given what we learned about their sleep patterns, that makes total sense.
Right. And Dr. Walker even cites studies showing that delaying school start times by just 30 minutes can have huge positive effects.
Huge effects like what?
Better grades, improved mood, even a reduction in car accidents.
So it's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly. Another solution he proposes is more flexible work schedules.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more.
So instead of forcing everyone into a 9-to-5 workday, we could allow people to work during their peak productivity times.
Right. Accommodating those different chronotypes.
Exactly. It could lead to happier, healthier, and more productive employees. And plus, it could even help reduce those awful rush hour commutes.
That's a great point. So less stress and more sleep all around.
Exactly. Now, those are some big picture solutions, but what about on a more individual level? What can we do to advocate for our own sleep needs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in a world that often prizes busyness over rest, how do we make sleep a priority?
The Mystery of Sleep has some good advice for this. Dr. Krieger says to talk to your doctor about any sleep concerns you're having.
Right. Don't just suffer in silence.
Exactly. And talk to your employer, too. Explain why getting enough sleep is crucial for you to do your job well.
It's about changing that mindset that sleep is somehow a sign of weakness. It's a sign of health. It makes us better at everything.
Exactly. And education is key, too. The more we all understand about sleep, the better we can advocate for ourselves and for changes in our communities and workplaces.
It's like a sleep revolution, starting with each of us.
I love that. A sleep revolution. Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the science of sleep.
Wow, that was incredible. I don't know about you, but my mind is officially blown.
Me too. It's a lot to process.
It is, but it's so empowering too, knowing how much control we actually have over our sleep.
Exactly. And hopefully our listeners are feeling inspired to make some changes in their own lives,
Yeah.
Whether it's adjusting their sleep habits, advocating for later school start times, or just talking to their doctor about any sleep concerns they might have.
Sleep is such a gift, and we need to start treating it that way.
I couldn't agree more. Sweet dreams, everyone.
Sweet dreams.